Imagine this. It's 2 a.m., the kind of night where the air feels heavy, and the streets are eerily silent. A woman is walking alone, her footsteps echoing against the pavement. She's just another face in the crowd, or so it seems. But tonight, her life is about to collide with danger in a way no one could have predicted. Two escaped felons, desperate and armed, are lurking in the shadows. They've been on the run for days, and they need a hostage to stay ahead of the law. They spot her, an easy target or so they think. What happens next will leave you on the edge of your seat, questioning everything you thought you knew about survival, strength, and the hidden battles people fight every day. Because this woman isn't who she appears to be. She's not just a random victim. She's special forces. And these felons? They've just made the biggest mistake of their lives. Now, I know what you're thinking. How does a trained special forces operative end up in a situation like this? What happens when the hunter becomes the hunted? And most importantly, how does she turn the tables on her captors? These are the questions that will keep you hooked, and I promise you by the end of this story, you'll have the answers. But here's the thing. This isn't just a tale of action and revenge. It's a story about resilience, about the power of the human spirit, and about what happens when ordinary people are pushed to their absolute limits. It's about the choices we make when our backs are against the wall, and the secrets we carry that can change everything in an instant. Let's talk about her for a moment. She's not your typical action hero. She's not some invincible super soldier. She's real. She's human. She's someone who's been through hell and back, both on and off the battlefield. Her name is Captain Elena Reyes, and she spent years honing her skills in some of the most dangerous corners of the world. But tonight, she's not in a war zone. She's in her hometown, trying to piece together a life that's been shattered by loss and betrayal. She's trying to be normal, whatever that means. But normal doesn't last long when you're trained to expect the unexpected. And when those felons grab her, they have no idea what they've just unleashed. Then there's them, the felons. Marcus and Jax. Two men who've spent their lives running from consequences. They're not masterminds. They're desperate. They've made bad choices, and now they're backed into a corner. But desperation can make people dangerous, and these two are no exception. They think they've got the upper hand. They think they've found the perfect pawn to play their game. But what they don't realize is that they've just stepped into a game they can't win. Because Captain Reyes? She's been playing this game her whole life. And she doesn't lose. As the story unfolds, you'll find yourself drawn into a world where nothing is as it seems. You'll feel the tension in every heartbeat, the adrenaline in every breath. You'll be right there with Captain Reyes as she uses every ounce of her training, her wit, and her will to survive. You'll see the felons' desperation grow as they realize they've bitten off more than they can chew. And you'll be left wondering, how far would you go to survive? What would you do if you were in her shoes? Or theirs? But here's the thing. This isn't just a story about a kidnapping. It's about the moments that define us. It's about the choices we make when the stakes are life and death. It's about the strength we find when we have nothing left to lose. And it's about the unexpected twists that can change everything in an instant. Because just when you think you know how this story ends, something happens that will leave you speechless. Something that will make you question everything you thought you knew about courage, about fear, and about the thin line between the two. So here's my promise to you. If you stick with me, if you stay until the very end, you'll get the answers you're looking for. You'll see how this night unfolds, how the pieces fall into place, and how one woman's strength and determination can change everything. But be warned, this isn't a story for the faint of heart. It's raw, it's real, and it's going to keep you guessing until the very last second. Because just when you think you've figured it out, the game changes. And that's when things get really interesting. Now, before we dive in, I want to ask you something. Have you ever felt like the world was against you? Like no matter what you did, you couldn't catch a break? If you have, then you're going to connect with this story on a whole different level. Because at its core, this is a story about overcoming the impossible. It's about finding the strength to keep going, even when everything inside you wants to give up. And it's about realizing that sometimes, the greatest battles we fight are the ones no one else can see. So, are you ready? Are you ready to step into the shoes of a woman who's about to face the fight of her life? Are you ready to see how one night can change everything? Good. Because this is where the story begins. And trust me, you're not going to want to miss what happens next. But before we get to the heart of it, let me ask you this. What would you do if you were in her place? If you were taken by two desperate men, with no way out, would you fight? Or would you freeze? Think about it. Because by the end of this story, you might just find yourself answering that question in a way you never expected. And now, as the clock ticks closer to 2:30 a.m., as the felons tighten their grip and Captain Reyes begins to plan her next move, I'll leave you with this. Sometimes, the most dangerous people are the ones you least expect. And sometimes, the greatest strength comes from the most unexpected places. But what happens when those two truths collide? Well, that's where our story begins. And trust me, you're not going to want to miss what happens next. The night Captain Elena Reyes was taken was supposed to be like any other. She had just finished a late shift at the Veteran Support Center where she volunteered, helping others navigate the same kind of invisible scars she carried. The streets were quiet, the kind of quiet that makes you feel like you're the only person left in the world. But Elena wasn't afraid. She'd walked these streets 100 times before, and besides, fear wasn't something she allowed herself to feel anymore. Not after everything she'd been through. Not after the missions that had taken her to the edge of humanity and back. But tonight was different. Tonight, the shadows held more than just darkness. They held Marcus and Jax, two men who had nothing left to lose and everything to gain by taking her. Marcus was the brains of the operation, if you could call it that. He was the one who'd planned the prison break, who'd mapped out their escape route, and who'd convinced Jax that kidnapping a random woman was their best shot at staying free. But Marcus wasn't as smart as he thought he was. He didn't know the first thing about Elena Reyes. He didn't know about her time in the Special Forces, about the missions that had left her with nightmares and a skill set that made her one of the most dangerous people in the room, no matter where she was. And Jax? Jax was just along for the ride. He was the muscle, the one who didn't ask questions as long as there was a payout at the end. But even Jax had his limits, and as the night wore on, those limits were starting to show. Elena, on the other hand, was calculating. From the moment they grabbed her, she was already 3 steps ahead. She knew better than to panic. Panic got you killed. Instead, she observed. She listened. She memorized every detail. The way Marcus's voice cracked when he was nervous, the way Jax's hand shook when he held the gun. She noted the make and model of the van they shoved her into, the smell of stale cigarettes and sweat, the faint hum of the engine that told her it was an older vehicle, probably stolen. She filed it all away, piece by piece, waiting for the right moment to strike. But she also knew that timing was everything. One wrong move, and she could end up dead. Or worse, they could realize who she was, and then the game would change entirely. Meanwhile, unbeknownst to Marcus and Jax, the authorities were closing in. The prison break had made headlines, and every law enforcement agency in the state was on high alert. But there was more to it than that. Elena wasn't just a random victim. She had connections. People who would notice if she went missing. People who wouldn't stop until they found her. One of those people was her former commanding officer, Colonel James Mitchell. Mitchell had been like a father to Elena, the one person she trusted implicitly. When he got the call that she was missing, he didn't hesitate. He mobilized a team, calling in favors and pulling strings to get access to resources that weren't exactly by the book. Because Mitchell knew something the felons didn't. Elena wasn't just special forces. She was part of a classified unit, one that didn't officially exist. And if Marcus and Jax thought they were in over their heads now, they had no idea what was coming. As the hours passed, the tension in the van grew thicker. Marcus was getting antsy, his plan unraveling faster than he could keep up with. They needed money, a car, and a way out of the state, but every move they made seemed to backfire. Jax, for his part, was starting to crack. He hadn't signed up for this. He just wanted a quick score, a way to start over. But now, with Elena in the back of the van, silent and watchful, he couldn't shake the feeling that they'd made a terrible mistake. "She's too calm," he muttered to Marcus at one point. "It's not right." Marcus brushed him off, but the seed of doubt had been planted. And Elena? She heard every word. She knew exactly how to play them against each other. All she needed was the right opportunity. But the story doesn't just belong to Elena and her captors. There's another layer to this, one that adds an even deeper level of mystery. Earlier that day, before the kidnapping, Elena had received a cryptic message from an old contact, someone she hadn't heard from in years. The message was short, just a few words: "They know. Be careful." At the time, Elena hadn't thought much of it. She'd assumed it was related to her past, to the mission she'd left behind. But now, as she sat in the back of the van, her hands bound and her mind racing, she couldn't help but wonder if there was more to it. Was this kidnapping just a coincidence? Or was it connected to something bigger, something darker? The thought sent a chill down her spine, but she pushed it aside. She couldn't afford to lose focus. Not now. And then there's the subplot of Marcus's past, the one he's been running from for as long as he can remember. He wasn't always a felon. Once, he was just a kid from a broken home, trying to make it in a world that didn't care about people like him. But one bad decision led to another, and before he knew it, he was in too deep. The prison break was supposed to be his second chance, his way out. But now, with Elena in the picture, he's starting to realize that there's no such thing as a clean slate. Every choice he's made has led him here, to this moment, and there's no going back. As the night stretches on, the stakes grow higher. Elena's training kicks in, and she begins to subtly manipulate her captors, planting seeds of doubt and fear. She knows that if she can get them to turn on each other, her chances of survival increase exponentially. But she also knows that time is running out. The authorities are closing in, and Marcus and Jax are getting desperate. And then there's the question of that cryptic message. Who knows what? And what are they willing to do to keep it hidden? The tension is palpable, the kind that makes you hold your breath without even realizing it. You can feel the weight of every decision, the ripple effect of every action. And just when you think you've got a handle on what's happening, the story takes another twist. Because this isn't just a story about a kidnapping. It's about the secrets we keep, the lies we tell, and the lengths we'll go to protect them. It's about the thin line between right and wrong, and how easily it can blur when your back is against the wall. And it's about the unexpected connections that can change everything in an instant. So, as the clock ticks closer to dawn, as Elena prepares to make her move and Marcus and Jax brace for the fallout, one question remains. Who will come out on top? Will Elena's training and instincts be enough to save her? Or will Marcus and Jax's desperation prove to be too much? And what about that cryptic message? What does it mean, and how does it tie into everything that's happening? The answers are coming, but not yet. Because the night isn't over. And neither is the story. As the first light of dawn began to creep over the horizon, the tension inside the van was almost unbearable. Marcus was pacing, his nerves frayed to the breaking point, while Jack sat slumped in the driver's seat, his hands gripping the steering wheel like it was the only thing keeping him grounded. Elena, still bound in the back, remained eerily calm, her sharp eyes tracking every movement, every shift in their body language. She had been waiting for the right moment, and she could feel it coming. But just as she was about to make her move, something unexpected happened. The van's radio crackled to life, and a voice came through. A voice that made Marcus freeze in his tracks. It was a voice from his past, one he thought he'd never hear again. "Marcus," the voice said, low and menacing. "You've got something I want. And you're going to give it to me." The voice belonged to Victor Kane, a name that sent a chill down Marcus's spine. Victor was a crime boss, the kind of man who didn't take no for an answer. Years ago, Marcus had worked for him, running errands and doing odd jobs until he'd made the mistake of crossing him. He'd thought he'd left that life behind, but now, with Victor's voice coming through the radio, he realized he'd been wrong. Dead wrong. "You think you can just walk away from me?" Victor continued, his tone dripping with venom. "You think you can take what's mine and disappear? You've got 1 hour to bring her to me. If you don't, I'll find you. And when I do, you'll wish you'd never been born." Elena's mind raced as she processed what she was hearing. This wasn't just a random kidnapping anymore. There was something bigger at play here, something she didn't fully understand. But one thing was clear. Victor Kane wasn't after Marcus. He was after her. The realization sent a jolt of adrenaline through her veins. She had no idea why a crime boss would be interested in her, but she knew one thing for certain. She couldn't let him get his hands on her. Whatever this was about, it was bad. Really bad. Marcus, meanwhile, was spiraling. He turned to Jax, his eyes wild with panic. "We've got to get out of here," he said, his voice trembling. "If Victor finds us, we're dead." Jax, who had been silent up until now, finally snapped. "Dead? We're already dead, Marcus. You dragged us into this mess, and now we're screwed. I told you this was a bad idea, but you didn't listen. And now look where we are." The two men were on the verge of coming to blows, their fear and frustration boiling over. Elena saw her chance. "Listen to me," she said, her voice calm but commanding. "If you let me go, I can help you. I can get you out of this. But if you hand me over to Victor, you're signing your own death warrants." Marcus hesitated, torn between his fear of Victor and the glimmer of hope Elena was offering. But before he could respond, the sound of approaching sirens cut through the air. The authorities were closing in, and fast. Marcus and Jax exchanged a panicked look. They were out of time. "We've got to move," Jack said, his voice tight with urgency. "Now." Marcus nodded, his decision made. He grabbed Elena by the arm and yanked her out of the van, dragging her toward a nearby abandoned warehouse. Jax followed close behind, his gun drawn and his eyes darting nervously in every direction. Inside the warehouse, the air was thick with dust and the smell of decay. Marcus shoved Elena into a corner and turned to Jax. "We've got to figure out what to do," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "We can't stay here. They'll find us." But Elena wasn't about to wait for them to make up their minds. She had been biding her time, and now she was ready to act. With a swift, calculated movement, she dislocated her thumb, slipping free of the zip ties that bound her hands. Before Marcus or Jax could react, she was on her feet, her training kicking in. She disarmed Jax with a single fluid motion, sending his gun skittering across the floor. Marcus lunged at her, but she sidestepped him easily, delivering a sharp blow to his ribs that left him gasping for air. "I told you," she said, her voice cold and steady. "You picked the wrong woman." But just as Elena was about to make her escape, the warehouse doors burst open, and a group of armed men stormed in. They weren't cops. They weren't even close. These men were professionals, their movements precise and coordinated. And at their head was Victor Kane himself. He stepped forward, a cruel smile twisting his lips as he took in the scene. "Well, well," he said, his voice dripping with mockery. "Looks like I've got everyone I need right here." Elena's heart sank as she realized the truth. This wasn't just about her. This was about something much bigger, something that had been set in motion long before tonight. And now, with Victor in the picture, the stakes had just gotten a whole lot higher. Victor's men quickly surrounded Elena, Marcus, and Jax, their weapons trained on them with deadly precision. Victor stepped closer, his eyes locking onto Elena's. "You've been a hard woman to find, Captain Reyes," he said, his tone almost conversational. "But now that I've got you, we can finally settle this." Elena's mind raced, trying to piece together what he meant. What could a crime boss possibly want with her? And then it hit her. It wasn't her he was after. It was what she knew. The classified missions, the secrets she'd carried for years, they were the real prize. And Victor was willing to do whatever it took to get them. As Victor's men began to close in, Elena knew she was running out of options. But she also knew one thing for certain. She wasn't going down without a fight. Whatever Victor had planned, she was going to make sure it didn't happen. Even if it cost her everything. The tension in the warehouse was palpable, the air thick with the promise of violence. And as Victor gave the order to take Elena, the stage was set for a showdown that would change everything. But the question remained, who would come out on top? And what secrets would be revealed in the process? The answers were coming, but not yet. Because the fight was just beginning. And nothing would ever be the same again. The warehouse was a pressure cooker of tension, every second stretching into an eternity as Victor Kane's men closed in. Elena Reyes stood her ground, her mind racing through every possible scenario, every move she could make to turn the tables. She knew she was outnumbered and outgunned, but she also knew one thing. She had been trained for moments like this. Moments where the odds were stacked against her. Where failure wasn't an option. Victor's smug grin widened as he stepped closer, his voice dripping with malice. "You've got something I need, Captain Reyes," he said. His tone almost conversational, as if they were old friends catching up. "And you're going to give it to me. One way or another." Elena's eyes flicked to Marcus and Jax, who were now cowering against the wall, their earlier bravado completely shattered. She could see the fear in their eyes, the realization that they were in way over their heads. But she didn't have time to worry about them. Her focus was on Victor and his men, on finding a way out of this alive. "You think you can just walk in here and take what you want?" she said, her voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her veins. "You don't know who you're dealing with." Victor chuckled, a low menacing sound that sent a shiver down her spine. "Oh, I know exactly who I'm dealing with," he said. "And that's why I'm here." Before Elena could respond, one of Victor's men lunged at her, his hand reaching for her arm. She reacted instantly, her training kicking in as she twisted his wrist and disarmed him in one fluid motion. The gun clattered to the floor, and chaos erupted. Victor barked orders, his men surging forward as Elena fought with everything she had. She moved like a whirlwind, every strike precise, every movement calculated. But there were too many of them, and she knew it was only a matter of time before they overwhelmed her. Just as she was about to be pinned down, a deafening explosion rocked the warehouse, sending everyone sprawling to the ground. The doors burst open, and a team of heavily armed operatives stormed in, their faces obscured by tactical gear. Elena's heart leapt as she recognized the insignia on their uniforms. Colonel Mitchell's team. They had found her. The operatives moved with military precision, quickly neutralizing Victor's men and securing the area. Victor, realizing the tide had turned, tried to make a run for it, but Elena was faster. She tackled him to the ground, her knee pressing into his back as she cuffed him with a pair of zip ties. "You're under arrest," she said, her voice cold and unwavering. Victor snarled, struggling against her grip, but it was no use. The fight was over. As the dust settled, Colonel Mitchell approached, his face a mixture of relief and anger. "You've got a knack for finding trouble, Reyes," he said, his tone gruff but affectionate. Elena managed a tired smile. "Trouble seems to find me, sir," she replied. Mitchell nodded, his expression turning serious. "We've been tracking Victor for months," he said. "He's been trying to get his hands on classified intel that could compromise national security. We had no idea he'd come after you." Elena's mind raced as she processed this new information. So that's what this was about. Victor hadn't just wanted her. He'd wanted the secrets she carried. And he'd been willing to do whatever it took to get them. Meanwhile, Marcus and Jax were being escorted out of the warehouse by Mitchell's team, their faces pale with shock. Elena watched them go, a pang of sympathy cutting through her exhaustion. They were just pawns in Victor's game, two men who had made bad choices and paid the price. But they were alive, and that was something. As the operatives began to clear the scene, Mitchell turned to Elena, his expression softening. "You did good, Reyes," he said. "But next time, try not to go solo, all right? We're a team for a reason." Elena nodded, a small smile tugging at her lips. "Noted, sir." But just as they were about to leave, one of Mitchell's operatives approached, holding a small, sleek device. "We found this on Victor," he said, handing it to Mitchell. The colonel's face darkened as he examined it. "This is a data drive," he said, his voice low. "And it's encrypted." Elena's heart sank as she realized the implications. Victor hadn't just been after her. He'd been after something specific. Something that could still be out there. Mitchell turned to her, his expression grim. "This isn't over," he said. "Not by a long shot." As they left the warehouse, the first rays of sunlight breaking through the clouds, Elena couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning. Victor might be in custody, but there were others out there. Others who would stop at nothing to get what they wanted. And she knew, deep down, that she would be ready for them. Because that's who she was. A soldier. A survivor. And no matter what came next, she would face it head-on. The story of Captain Elena Reyes and the escaped felons who kidnapped her is one of resilience, courage, and the unbreakable human spirit. It's a reminder that even in our darkest moments, we have the strength to fight back, to overcome, and to rise above. And as the sun rose on a new day, Elena knew one thing for certain. She wasn't just a victim. She was a hero. And her story was far from over.